After many years in the making, followed by licensing issues and delays, came Industrial Accident, the story of Wax Trax Records. It's a documentary about Wax Trax and its owners, Jim Nash and Danny Flesher. Wax Trax was the store and label that became the center of industrial, noise, and EBM in the 1980s and 90s. Based in Chicago, it had groundbreaking bands such as Front 242, My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult, Ministry and its many side projects, KMFDM, Frontline Assembly, and many more. Home movie footage, music videos, and new interviews with key people were used to tell the story. Where this movie succeeds is that the right people were spoken to, the biggest albums and hits were mentioned, and the primary history was discussed. A lot of people were interviewed here, not just the bands, but store and label employees, family members of Jim and Danny, industry people, and of course Dave Grohl. What would a music documentary be without Dave Grohl somewhere? Even old excerpts of interviews by Jim and Danny themselves are in this. Also, gotta love Uncle Al's fake British accent.
What happens is a lot of these bands from Europe that we're big fans of.
Jim Nash was married with kids when he met Dan Flesher in the 70s. He split up with his wife and their relationship lasted for decades with her blessing. They were passionate about underground music and weird music in general. With their own record collection in mind, they opened the original Wax Trax in Denver, but moved to Chicago some years later. There were bands they would come across that were unsigned, had unreleased songs, or were something they thought were special. So they started the label and started releasing things. A big snowball effect was in play. Early Ministry brought them some attention, Front 242 brought them even more, and Revolting Cocks gave a good impression for fans of the label because as a supergroup, it made everything seem tight-knit. The reason Wax Trax took off was because Jim and Danny were passionate about the music they liked and they wanted people to hear it. It was about taking what they enjoyed and sharing it with like-minded people. The store was a hangout spot. People met each other and formed bands through the store connections sometimes. Some of the bands Wax Trax signed were international, so if the international bands were already signed to a European label, they would license the albums to Wax Trax and save the cost of shipping them to the store in the United States. A lot of the music was innovative and ahead of its time. Some of these bands were so new and out there that major labels didn't touch them. What else made Wax Trax welcoming was that Jim and Danny were openly gay. Especially in the 1970s and 80s when it was such a taboo thing, it encouraged friends and people around them to be who they were and be unapologetic about it. For punks, misfits, outcasts, and people in isolated rural areas, Wax Trax served as a form of escapism. But it was also about artistry, musicianship, and doing what felt right without necessarily trying to get hits. As an independent label, it wasn't about making a lot of money and there was little regard to the business side of things. That was a blessing and a curse. Sure, a lot of great and unconventional music got released, but there were plenty of decisions made that bit them in the ass later. Industrial Accident goes into some of the issues they face and moves they made to keep the store and label going. Not only does Industrial Accident show how the label did things, but it also gave an insight as to who Jim and Danny were as people. They were family people, authority figures, and friends all at once. People who were driven by what interested them. There are several stories in this movie about how strong their personalities were and how their relationship made sense. Even Jim's ex-wife stayed friends with him after the divorce. As far as how this movie handles all of the information given, it does so without pretension, without repeating itself, and without needing a lot of context. So if you're just getting into this kind of music, you can get plenty out of this. But even if you already know most of these bands, have owned the Black Box for years, and have had the chance to see some of these bands live, it's a supplement to what you already know. There are so many backstories behind the albums, the tours, and the people that you couldn't fit them all into a movie without it being a mess. A couple of new stories are told, and a couple of old stories are mentioned, especially in the bonus interviews. But Industrial Accident doesn't feel the need to bombard you with every little detail about every little thing. It's a big story, and the movie isn't bigger than what it needs to be. Everything's very well done. So grab your combat boots and your Lead and Gold singles, and you're good to go.